The Daily Report on our Power and Politics segment with me, George Maringa. Catherine Simaloy is on sign language interpretation tonight. Professor Peter Kagwanja, a policy advisor and strategist, and Professor Mashere Munene, a political historian, are our guests tonight as we look at matters state of the nation. We've looked at, the current situation politically in the country from all the impeachment conversations. Let's focus on a gentleman who has been at the center of it all while it was happening, both locally and internationally, regionally as well. Honorable Raila Odinga, who is the AUC candidate for Kenya, there has been discussions about the candidacy so far. With the elections next year, when you look at this, are we making headway as a country with our candidate who has also been in the eye of a storm following the local events in the country, the political events in the country? Where are we with matters AUC?
Well, I'm controversial in this, so I don't promise you anything. I would say the way, Winston Churchill would say, I have nothing to give you except tears.
Are they premium?
Yeah.
Are they premium tears?
So I have nothing to give you but tears.
Okay.
Because I don't think, in the first place, any serious Kenyan who really want Kenya to prosper and Africa to prosper would have urged Raila Odinga to be a candidate at 80 years for an executive position that is reserved by the continent for people who retire between 50 and 70. And if you look from the past, whether you're talking about the man from Mali, or you're talking about the man from Guinea, Gabon, Jinping, or you're talking about the lady from South Africa, Dramini Zuma, or you're now talking about the gentleman from Chad. They are all, they were Faki. They are all below, they were all below 60, and by the time they are retiring, they whatever. So I don't think it's fair to basically assume that Raila will assume the AU seat at 80 and then continue to govern the African continent at 88, because you have 4-year term, so renewable, and then is at 88. I mean, if you look at the Joe Biden and what has happened to him, just let's be honest with the biology. Let's remember our biology classes that that which is born must also reach the age when you can say this is aged, and eventually it will age out. So that is the first Kenya's cardinal sin. That's not only Odinga's sin. It is the nature of our politics, whereby you come up with a scheme that looks like it's a win-win situation for Raila and win-win situation for Ruto. Now, it is in Ruto's interest basically to have Raila Odinga on his corner, because without Raila Odinga, he would not have managed to impeach Rigathi Gachagua. He needed Raila's number. And why Raila? Because Raila is the only politician in this republic, from the time I can remember, 1994 to date, who has managed to put his community in one party, whether he is in NDP or he is in LDP or he is in KANU or he is later on in wherever, he has managed to carry his people with him, or the vast majority. Two, they have this devotion, which is almost religious, not even ideological. It is ecstatic. He pulls the crown to the point that if you are looking for matters, you'll get them. And that is very worrying for other politicians. Let Uhuru Kenyatta try that, he can't succeed. Let them try it in Western Kenya where Tangura Mudavadi, they can't. Let them try it at the coast, they can't. But Raila somehow has managed to mobilize his community around him, not for 10 years, but for all the years of his political life. I can guess from 1994. And as a result then, it is more convenient for William Ruto to stabilize. And William Ruto is just borrowing a leaf from what Kenyatta had done. The handshake between Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila had nothing to do with the love of the nation. I mean, let's be honest with ourselves. It was not the love of the nation. It was the survival of that political system. Because how would Uhuru, with the numbers having been taken by Ruto, in terms of parliamentary, how did he have governed to the end of his term? He needed Raila in order to give him numbers in parliament so that he can pass his bills, particularly the financial bills, that would enable him to spend and therefore pay for the various things that he was doing. So keep that in mind, that the AUC seat is simply a carrot. That may not be for Raila, but to ensure that is something. But look at it. What does it actually mean? What does the US seat mean for Kenya? It is not about whether we'll have a seat there, because that's a paid salary. I mean, a salaried job. So why would we be talking about how many? We had Mukisa Kitui in Anactad. We have had other prominent Kenyans in other positions. Why are we obsessed with this seat? Because it is the only legitimation for Ruto and others to spend on Raila as an opposition leader. So we find ourselves as a country caught up in what is a mongrel democracy that do not make sense to our grandchildren. How can you be the opposition leader and your top members of your party are in government? It defeats, because it's such a curious mongrel of a government, to the point that you cannot say we have an opposition party. We don't. We don't have an opposition party. We don't have a government that is pure in the sense of the government. And we don't have a communist government the way we know it in China, where we have this. But the issue is that the AUC seat enables Raila to spend, to move as a diplomat, to have security, to have everything, because he's a government candidate. And of course, for Kenya to flex muscle out there, that we have a heavyweight candidate that we're giving you. I am not sure that he will win the seat, given the circumstances of the continent. I want to be a patriotic Kenyan. I would like him to win, because he will give me consultancy, because that's one of the areas we go. So from a self-interest point of view, I am saying, go on, Raila, go on. But from a patriotic Pan-African position, I think Kenya is very, very unfair to the world and to the African people anywhere. Because if, for example, and I know somebody will think I'm saying this because I'm from Mount Kenya. No, not really. The best candidate you would have had would have been Uhuru Kenyatta. He has just retired. He is turning 63. So by the time he's elected, he'll be 63. 63, add 8 years to his life. That he'll be 71. Yeah, then he can go to Gatundu and continue growing his bananas or whatever else he does. He'll still be having time to advise other people. I mean, if Kenya was literally playing its nationalistic politics, we have a better choice. At a certain time, I know, because I'm a keen observer of Pan-African politics, Uhuru Kenyatta was just almost next to Mandela in terms of the way he's taken on the continent. Just like the euphoria you see around William Ruto. He's also loved across the continent, by the way. William Ruto is also loved in many quarters around the continent and around the world. So these are the candidates we are talking about. If William Ruto retires after he was lucky, and 2027 he goes over and gets his another 5 years, he'll be 10 years. You add it to his years now, he'll be a prime candidate for the African Union. And Kenya will have done justice to the world. But now, when you start doing things that add to the idea, what is the game? The game is when Raila wins the AU seat or doesn't win, the real winner will be William Ruto. Yes, because the people of Nyanza cannot say he didn't give him the chance. He was given the chance. If he wins, he'll be out of politics in 2027. Therefore, he's not going to give Ruto a headache.
Okay. So, in terms of Professor Panshara Munene, are you there? What do you make of this, Raila Odinga candidacy to the AUC, and in terms of even the current political moves that we've seen, members of the predominantly opposition being able to join government at the same time that his candidacy is being flaunted to the rest of the African continent? As you get Prof. Kagwanja, you've mentioned the issue of opposition in government. It is a trend that has taken over Africa for quite a while, looking at South Africa, Nigeria, and Kenya. We had the Nusumkate at the time, and then now we had the handshake, and we're now in matters broad-based. What is it about opposition that Africa seems not to like?
Well, first and foremost, the idea of opposition in African policy doesn't sit well with our being. And I am sure there are some people who take issue with that. Opposition is not African. And I say so because, the opposition, the way it is. Because if you listen to what Nyerere was telling us, is that as Africans, we like it when we sit down for long hours and long periods to discuss an issue until we agree. Our democracy is not very different from the Greek democracy, which is basically by consensus. And eventually we have to vote. And when we vote or cast the vote, we are saying this is where we are going. That even those who don't agree with us have to move with us together because we want to go together. So our philosophy is very close to the philosophy you find in China. Harmony. You agree that we are different. We are tall, we are short, but at the same time, we must move together. So the quest for harmony. The Western idea where the notion of opposition comes from, believe in one dictum, that progress comes as a result of conflict. So war is inevitable. Conflict is inevitable. And therefore, you institutionalize it. So it's a conflict between the government and the opposition, according to the Westerners, that give us the dialectic. Dialectic is where you have the inferior system giving way to a more superior system. So the opposition is not largely African. But at the same time, neither Nkrumah, nor Nyerere, nor the founding fathers of the continent gave us a better alternative to what we had inherited from colonialism as, this government, which has an opposition and a government. And therefore, we are trying to find a way of how do we then ensure that in our ethnically divided societies that we are able to live together. And that is what has given rise to this idea of power sharing. But then it is such a waste of resources and a waste of time, because in this country we call Kenya, we spend $25 on average to secure the sanctity of the vote, to secure the privacy of the vote, and to secure the right of every individual to vote as an individual. Because the smallest element of a democratic establishment is the individual. And therefore, the protection of the individual vote is so important. But what happens? Immediately we cast the ballot, we start talking about we. So you cast the ballot alone, but you say we in Mount Kenya are marginalized. We in Nyanza need to be in the government. So what was Gachagua seeing by talking about shareholders? But is that really in democratic sense a sin? No, because governments are about those who won. The big question is, how do you ensure that winners don't take all and losers don't lose all for the balance in society? But essentially, the government, those who have won the government, have the share of the government, the largest share of the government. And they are the shareholders in that particular government. And those who are who lose out would be seeking to have a share, not in the government, but in the development process.
Professor Macharia Munene, looking at these matters of AUC, opposition now in government, and all these political moves that we are seeing, what do you make of it and the candidacy of the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga?
Well, the candidacy of Raila Odinga and the AUC is a viable one. It is a good exercise. It is not guaranteed that you get the job. He is facing stiff opposition. But it's a good exercise that makes Kenyans excited about a possibility of one of their own becoming chair. It's not the first time that Kenya is fronting somebody. It has done that before and failed. Whether it will succeed this time is another matter. But what is attractive about this one is because the candidate has a lot of pull in Kenyan politics. And there are those people who want him to go and get a job so that he can get out of the local politics. And then they'll have some room to maneuver. And there are those who are hoping that that will be the end of him in local power play. The other side is that whether he gets it or not, and he himself has said it before, Addis Ababa is just 2 hours flight to Nairobi, so he's going nowhere. And don't be surprised if Raila is a candidate in 2027, if he thinks he can clinch the presidency in 2027, given the environment and the political dynamics in the country. I think Raila is very eager to be called His Excellency the President of the Republic of Kenya. And if that possibility is looming high, you will see him as a candidate in 2027. 2027. Whether he loses it or not is another matter. So being in Addis Ababa is not a guarantee that he's off the campaign trail. His soldiers have made it very clear they'll continue doing it. There are people who are likely to be disappointed when he shows up his colors and says he's there. And it's not once that he has said he will do that, many times. So, assuming he gets it and assuming he is enticed to stay in Addis Ababa, then it opens the avenue to other players. Right now, Kalonzo Musyoka is looking very good as a potential challenger to William Ruto right now. And what Raila's president will do is to complicate the mathematics of it. So that I guess the Kalonzo people are figuring out how to prepare for that eventuality, because it is a real possibility that, and if they don't prepare for that, then they'll be very foolish. So the whole thing is going to be very interesting to watch. If Raila decides to be a candidate, of course, he and Ruto are going to fall out because they have a temporary alliance. This temporary merger and coalition was mainly aimed at fixing Gachagua, and it seems to have done a pretty good job of that. But once Gachagua is out of the way, and they're still jostling for who is bigger than the other, who should be ahead of the other. So we are likely to see that development taking place in the next 2-3 years. Okay.
Let's enter into the home stretch, Professor Kagwanja. The outlook is looking very unpredictable. You talked about the absence of the IEBC. So even the members who were appointed to cabinet, their constituencies have not yet been filled. And we've had other candidates before. You've spoken about the, God forbid, eventualities. Moving forward, we are already in October of 2024. It was 766 days for the president's, for the deputy president. The time is running out. When you look at development, what are some of the things you'd like to see? And juxtapose with the realities we are finding ourselves in, and what options all sides have, from those in power to those being governed.
I think you should not lie. Let's speak as it is. Let's call a spade a spade. Kenya is not on a very comfortable patch. Okay. We are not doing extremely well. We can only lie to ourselves. But given our history and our experience in the past, I think when a leader is in power, we tend to really robust them and paint the darkest color we can afford. That was not very different for Kibaki. When Kibaki was in office, I don't think I mean, by 2007, 2008, it was not really, a walk in the park. The same case with, before that time, Moi. But look at the way both of them became heroes towards the end for different reasons and focus of admiration. So there is a chance that William Ruto, can turn around and possibly make the best out of the situation and basically be a good leader. But at the same time, it doesn't seem like that's the direction we're moving towards.
Mm-hmm.
And what is the problem, and which possibly William Ruto need to focus on? First, it's a general understanding that the people you went to war with are not the same people you are going to govern with. And William Ruto, for the last 2 years, has been governing, the last 2.5 years, has been governing with the people who are still in the trenches. Therefore, they have no moral courage or even the foresight to tell him, get out of the rooftop of cars and sit in the office and work. Because that's what it takes. The governing period is a wrong one, 4 years. The electoral period is 1 year. So we are having the seamless politics where from day one to then the last day we are on the rooftops of cars. That is not that's not development and so on. So that's the first thing, that we need surgical reforms within the system that enables, that puts in place people who can govern, not people who can mobilize. Towards the end, 2026, 2027, he can go back to the default mode of politics and put the people who are there. That is the Gachagua tragedy, because Gachagua himself was a good warrior during the campaign. But was he a good warrior during the development phase?
Okay.
No, not really.
Okay.
So he need to do that. And that's why personally, I know this may not go down well with Mount Kenya Central and Mount Kenya, West. That Abraham Kidiki, Kithure Kindiki, may look timid and quiet and all that, but he's not very different from what Kibaki was. Mm-hmm. Somebody who is educated, experienced in the government, but looks like he doesn't, have a hold. He's not very assertive, so to say. But are those not the leaders who have made it in Kenya? George Saitoti before, Mwai Kibaki before that time, Daniel Moi and Jomo Kenyatta. There is a sense in that when you have leaders who have knowledge, who have experience, and they have the temperaments that matters, then you find that they govern well. We play. If it turns that it is Abraham Kindiki who becomes our deputy, that he's going to temper down this government in a manner that now Ruto settles down, get out of the rooftops of cars, and begin to do development for the remaining period. If that happens, you're going to see transformation.
Okay. Professor Mashere Munene, you get the last word. What would you like to see?
I would like to see the country become a little more settled in terms of direction, to see the institutions work, an end to experiments that make no sense. We have our universities are in a mess. Our health system is down the drain. And in part, these are because of some experiments that are being conducted without very careful thought as to what happens. I'd like to see the economy grow so that people have a little more confidence in the system, because there is very little confidence in the system today. And the country needs to restore confidence so that things can work. So when you get to a point where most people believe that nothing works, then it becomes very difficult for them to work. So a rectification, going back to the basics, that's all it's needed. So if the country can go back to the basics and stop experimenting, maybe it will recover and go somewhere positive. So those are some thoughts on what might need to be done.
Okay.
And that can come from the president and his team.
Indeed. Thank you so much. You've been speaking to Professor Mashere Munene, a political historian. Thank you so much, Prof, for joining us. Here in studio, we've had Professor Peter Kagwanja, policy advisor and strategist. Gentlemen, thank you for your insight. That is where we wind up the Daily Report tonight. My name is George Maringa. On Sign Language has been Catherine Simeloy. Tomorrow on the People's, or rather on 9 p.m., actually from 7 p.m., we'll be bringing you a special edition of Kikao as we focus on matters education. You want to stand by for that even as you continue to enjoy the rest of your viewing. As always, stay safe and be kind to one another. Good night from Nairobi.